Dad took my bonus and gave it to my brother. He deserves it more than you, he said. I smiled and transferred the rest of my savings. A week later he was begging me when. I should have seen it coming. I really should have. It wasn't like this was the first time my father had played favorites. Growing up, my younger brother Tyler could do no wrong in his eyes. If I got an A on a test, Tyler's B+ was more impressive, because he had so much potential. If I worked all summer to save up for a new bike, my dad would turn around and buy Tyler a brand new one because he needed encouragement. It was always like that. So when I got my first real bonus at work, a substantial one, I should have known better than to say anything. But for some stupid reason, I wanted to share the news. At dinner that night, I casually mentioned it, thinking maybe, just maybe, my parents would be proud of me. "Wow," my mom said, smiling. "That's great, honey." For a moment, I let myself believe that things were different now. That maybe, as an adult, I had finally earned their respect. Then my dad leaned back in his chair and said, "You should give it to Tyler." I actually laughed. I thought he was joking. But his face was dead serious. "He's been struggling," Dad continued. "It's been tough for him since he lost his last job." I set my fork down. "That was 6 months ago." "He's trying," my mom chimed in, as if that excused everything. I looked across the table at Tyler. He wasn't struggling. He wasn't even pretending to be embarrassed by this conversation. He was sitting there, twirling his fork, waiting for me to just agree. "That money is mine," I said slowly. "I worked for it." "And?" my dad scoffed. "You don't need it. You don't have a wife, or kids, or a mortgage. You live alone in that apartment of yours, doing what, saving up for video games?" He shook his head. "Tyler deserves it more than you." I stared at him. My heart was pounding, but not from sadness. It was anger. A deep, simmering anger that had been buried for years, just waiting for the right moment to rise to the surface. Tyler deserves it more than me. I could have argued. I could have yelled. I could have asked why, after all these years, I was still the one expected to sacrifice. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. "Okay," I said. My dad nodded approvingly, as if he had just taught me an important life lesson. "Good. I knew you'd do the right thing." I said nothing else. I finished my dinner, helped clear the plates, and went home. That night, I sat down at my computer, logged into my bank account, and transferred every last cent of my savings into a private account. An account my parents would never have access to. Then I set up my direct deposit to go there as well. They weren't getting another dime from me. And I had no idea just how soon they'd come to regret what they had done. A week passed, and I didn't bring up the money again. Neither did my parents. I assumed Tyler had already gotten his hands on it, spent it on whatever he deemed important, and moved on. I should have been angry. Maybe I was, a little. But mostly I just felt free. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about being the family's safety net. I wasn't checking my phone expecting a guilt trip message from my mom. I wasn't budgeting around the next inevitable loan that would never be repaid. It was just me, my hard-earned money, and a newfound sense of control. Then my dad called. I let it ring the first time. Then the second. Then the third. By the fourth call, I figured it had to be serious. When I answered, his voice wasn't demanding or dismissive like usual. He sounded tense. Almost uncertain. "We need to talk," he said. I leaned back in my chair. "About what?" There was a pause. Then, in a quieter voice, "Can you come over?" A week ago, I would have dropped everything. I would have assumed the worst and rushed to help, no questions asked. But this time, I hesitated. "Is this about money?" I asked. My dad exhaled sharply, the way he always did when he was frustrated but trying to hide it. "Just come by. Please. Please." That was new. Curious, I grabbed my keys and headed over. The moment I stepped inside my parents' house, I could feel the tension. My mom was sitting stiffly on the couch, her hands clenched together in her lap. Tyler was on his phone, pretending he wasn't part of this. And my dad, who normally acted like he ruled the house, was standing by the kitchen counter, rubbing his temples like he had the worst headache of his life. I shut the door behind me. "What's going on?" My dad cleared his throat. Something happened. I raised an eyebrow. Your brother, my mom said quickly, made a mistake. I glanced at Tyler, who still wasn't looking up from his phone. What kind of mistake? Tyler sighed heavily, as if this conversation was a waste of his time. It's not even a big deal. My dad shot him a glare. Not a big deal? You lost everything. That made me pause. Lost what? I asked. Dad exhaled, like the words physically pained him. The money. Your bonus. It's gone. I should have been surprised. Shocked. Instead, I just stared at him, waiting for the rest of the story. It was an investment, Tyler muttered. It was supposed to double in a month. I had a friend who... I held up a hand. Wait. You invested my money? Tyler finally looked up, as if I was the one being unreasonable. It's not like I just wasted it. It was supposed to be a sure thing. We just hit a bad streak, but if I had more to put in... A laugh slipped out before I could stop it. You want more? Tyler narrowed his eyes. Well, yeah. If I could just... No. The room went silent. What do you mean, no? My mom asked. I turned to her, finally understanding why they had all called me here. You expect me to fix this, don't you? My dad folded his arms. You're the only one who can. There it was. The same expectation, the same assumption that I would always be there to clean up their messes. But this time, I wasn't just an ATM, I was the backup plan when Tyler gambled away what wasn't his. Something inside me clicked into place. A final realization that no matter what I did, I would never be anything more to them than a resource. I took a deep breath, let it out slowly, then shook my head. I'm not giving you another cent. My mom gasped like I had just said something horrifying. But we need it. No, you don't. I looked at Tyler. He needs it. He made the mistake. He can fix it. Tyler scoffed. Are you serious? You're just gonna let me fail? I tilted my head. You didn't care when it was my money on the line. Why should I care now? My dad took a step forward. You don't understand, we're in a bad spot. I met his gaze steady and calm. You put yourselves in a bad spot. Silence. For the first time in my life, they were the ones looking at me like I held all the power. And I wasn't going to waste it. My dad clenched his jaw. My mom wrung her hands like she was about to cry. Tyler? He just rolled his eyes. So that's it, my dad said, his voice tight. You're just walking away? I shrugged. I didn't walk away. You pushed me. My mom reached for my arm. Sweetheart, please, we're family. I pulled back. No, we're not. We're a bank. Or at least I was. Dad's face darkened. You're being selfish. I almost laughed. Selfish. After everything. I took a deep breath, then looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in my life. No, I said quietly. I'm just done. And with that I turned and walked out. They didn't follow me. For the first time, they knew they couldn't. I expected them to call me again. To try to guilt me, to demand I do the right thing. But instead, all I got was silence. It was almost disappointing. Almost. I went about my life as usual, but I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because if there was one thing I knew about my parents, it was that they never accepted defeat. And sure enough, it happened 3 days later. I was at work when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Tyler. I ignored it. A minute later, another buzz. Then another. By the 5th call, I sighed and answered. What? His voice was different this time, frantic, desperate. I messed up. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Yeah, I got that part. No, worse. He rushed on. Dad took out a loan to cover the money I lost. I stilled. What kind of loan? Silence. Then, barely above a whisper. A bad one. I closed my eyes. Of course. Of course my father wouldn't just accept losing. Instead, he doubled down, just like Tyler. How much? I asked. He hesitated. 50. I nearly dropped my phone. $50,000? Tyler let out a shaky breath. I think he borrowed it from the wrong people. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I knew exactly what he meant. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about survival. I gripped the phone tighter. Tell me everything. Now. Tyler hesitated, and for the first time, I heard something I'd never heard from him before. Fear. Dad went to some guy, some loan shark. He muttered. I don't know the details, but he told me he could fix it. I clenched my jaw. And let me guess, he can't pay it back. Tyler's silence was my answer. My head was spinning. $50,000. That wasn't a small debt. That was the kind of number that ruined people. And if Dad had borrowed from the kind of people I suspected. I exhaled slowly. When's the deadline? Tyler swallowed. End of the week. 4 days. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to process. This wasn't just some financial blunder anymore. This was dangerous. And I had a choice to make. I could walk away, let them deal with the mess they created. They had never cared about how their actions affected me. Why should I? But if I did that, I wasn't just leaving them to struggle. I was leaving them in real trouble. I sighed. Where's Dad now? At home, Tyler said. He's freaking out. He won't talk to me or Mom. He just keeps pacing around, trying to figure out what to do. Good. He should be scared. But that didn't change the fact that this was now my problem, whether I liked it or not. I grabbed my keys. I'm coming over. Tyler let out a breath of relief. Thanks, man, Don't. I cut him off. I'm not doing this for you. I hung up before he could say another word. Whatever was coming next, I had a feeling it would change everything. I drove to my parents' house in silence, my mind racing. Part of me still wanted to turn around, let them deal with the mess they created. But the other part, the part that had spent a lifetime being the responsible one, knew I couldn't just ignore it. I pulled into the driveway and took a deep breath before stepping out. When I knocked, the door swung open almost immediately. My mom stood there, eyes red and puffy, wringing her hands. Oh, thank God. Come in, please. I stepped inside, and there he was. My dad. He sat hunched over at the kitchen table, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The man who had spent his entire life acting like he had all the answers now looked utterly lost. He barely glanced at me before mumbling. So, Tyler told you. I pulled out a chair and sat across from him. Yeah. He told me. What the hell were you thinking? Dad sighed, rubbing his face. I thought I could fix it. I just needed time. I shook my head. You don't fix gambling away money that wasn't yours by borrowing even more from a loan shark. Tyler was standing near the counter, arms crossed. It's not like we had another choice. I turned to him, my patience snapping. We? I scoffed. No. You had a choice. You could have not stolen my bonus. You could have not thrown it into some scam investment. But instead, you did what you always do, bet on someone else bailing you out. Tyler looked away. I turned back to Dad. How bad is it? His jaw tightened. 50,000. And the guy said if I don't have it by Friday, he's... Dad hesitated, looking down. He's sending people. The cold feeling in my stomach grew. I had no doubt that sending people meant something very, very bad. I exhaled slowly. Okay. First things first, show me everything. The contract, the terms, anything. Dad hesitated, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. I took it and scanned the contents. The terms were brutal. Insane interest rates, impossible deadlines. This wasn't just a loan, this was a trap. And my father had walked right into it. I put the paper down and leaned back. You know what this means, right? Dad didn't answer. It means even if you pay him back, he's not going to let you walk away, I said. People like this? They see desperation, and they exploit it. Mom covered her mouth, her breathing shaky. I looked back at Dad. Did you at least try to negotiate? He let out a bitter laugh. You don't negotiate with guys like him. I drummed my fingers against the table, thinking. There were only 2 ways out of a situation like this. Pay the guy off in full, or find another way to make him back off. And I wasn't about to throw my own money into this pit. I stood up. I'll handle it. Mom's head snapped up. You'll pay it? I scoffed. No. But I'll fix this. Dad frowned. How? I grabbed the contract and tucked it into my jacket. You'll see. And then I walked out. I had an idea. And if it worked? My family wasn't going to be in debt anymore. But my father? He was about to lose everything. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove straight to the source, the man my father owed. If I was going to fix this, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. The address was on the contract, a rundown office in a part of town where people didn't ask questions. I parked outside, took a steadying breath, and walked in. A man sat behind a desk, flipping through papers. He barely looked up. You're not your father. Could I said, tossing the contract onto his desk. I'm here to talk about this. That got his attention. He leaned forward, scanning me with interest. You got the money? No, I said. But I have a better offer. His lips curled into an amused smile. I doubt that. I met his gaze, steady and unwavering. Then you're going to love what I say next. Because what I had in mind. It wasn't just about paying off a debt. It was about making sure my father could never put me in this position again. The man across from me, Vincent, according to the nameplate on his desk, leaned back in his chair, sizing me up. All right, he said, smirking. You've got my attention. What's this better offer of yours? I picked up the contract and tapped it against the desk. You and I both know my dad can't pay this. Vincent shrugged. Not my problem. I nodded. Exactly. But what if I could make it your problem? His smirk faded just a little. Go on. I leaned forward. My father made this deal because he was desperate. And desperate people? They make stupid choices. But this contract, it's not just bad. It's illegal. Vincent's expression didn't change, but I could tell I'd hit a nerve. I continued, keeping my voice calm. The interest rate alone violates federal lending laws. The terms? They're built to keep him trapped, which makes it predatory lending. And if I take this to the right people, lawyers, the authorities, this business of yours gets a lot of unwanted attention. Vincent's fingers drummed against the desk. You're bluffing. I slid my phone out of my pocket and placed it face up on the desk. Am I? Because I just sent this contract to my lawyer before I walked in. That part was a lie. But he didn't know that. Vincent's smirk finally disappeared. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. And what exactly are you suggesting? I smiled. Simple. Erase the debt. He let out a sharp laugh. You think I'm just going to walk away? I shrugged. I think you'll weigh the options. You could take a loss on my father's loan and keep your business running smoothly, or you could let me walk out of here and start making some very loud phone calls. Silence. Vincent stared at me for a long moment, then finally exhaled through his nose. You've got guts. I'll give you that. Then, with a smirk, he pulled out a pen, scribbled something on the contract, and slid it back to me. Take it and get out, he said. I picked up the contract, folded it neatly, and slipped it into my pocket. Pleasure doing business. As I turned to leave, Vincent called out. Your old man's lucky to have you cleaning up his messes. I stopped at the door and looked back. Not anymore. Then I walked out, finally free. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove back to my parents' house, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind clearer than it had been in years. This wasn't just about fixing my father's mistake. It was about ending the cycle. When I walked through the door, my mom jumped up from the couch. Did you get the money? Please tell me you. I held up the contract and dropped it onto the coffee table. It's done. Dad snatched it up, his eyes scanning the page. His mouth fell open. What? How? The debt is erased, I said. Vincent won't be coming after you. For the first time all night, my father looked truly stunned. You paid him? I scoffed. No. I outmaneuvered him. Tyler blinked. So, we're good? I turned to him, shaking my head. No. We are not good. Tyler shrank back. I looked at my father. You stole from me. You threw my hard-earned money into a scam, and when it backfired, you put this entire family in danger. He rubbed his forehead. No. I cut him off. No excuses. No justifications. Just own it. Silence. I turned to my mom. And you? You sat by and let it happen. You've done that my entire life. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't let it shake me. I've spent years being the one you all rely on. I said, my voice steady. But I'm done. No more money. No more bailing you out. From now on, you stand on your own. Dad's face darkened. You can't just walk away from your family. I stared at him. Watch me. I turned, heading for the door. Wait. My mom called after me. We need you. I didn't stop. Because for the first time, I didn't need them. I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, letting the weight of the moment settle in. I had done it. I had walked away. Not just from a bad situation, but from years of being used, overlooked, and undervalued. And yet, as I sat there, I wasn't sure what I was feeling. Relief? Maybe. Closure? Not quite. There was something else, something quieter but just as powerful, certainty. For the first time, I was certain of one thing: I owed them nothing. I glanced at my phone again. My mom's text still sat there, waiting. Please don't do this. We're still your family. I thought about everything that phrase had meant over the years. Family had always been the excuse, the justification, the leash they had kept around me to make sure I never strayed too far, never questioned too much, never put myself first. But now? No. Family wasn't a reason to stay. It was the very reason I had to leave. Because real family doesn't take and take until there's nothing left. Real family doesn't steal from you. They don't manipulate you. They don't make you feel like you're never enough, while demanding everything you have. I exhaled slowly, unlocked my phone, and typed out a response. No. You were never my family. I was just your safety net. And I'm done. I hit send. Then, for good measure, I blocked her number. And my father's. And Tyler's. They wouldn't change. I knew that now. If I stayed, if I forgave them, it would only be a matter of time before they found another excuse, another way to sink their hooks into me. Not anymore. I started the engine, pulling out of the driveway, glancing at the house one last time in my rearview mirror. For years, this place had been a weight on my back. A constant reminder that no matter how much I achieved, I'd always be second best. That no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough. But as I turned onto the main road, something inside me shifted. I felt it leave me. The guilt. The obligation. The need for approval I was never going to get. I didn't know exactly what came next. But for the first time in my life, it was my choice to make. And that was worth more than any amount of money.